I think it's Peterson that says that an ideology is a like fragment of a story. So as opposed to having a fully developed worldview, an ideology is like having a piece of understanding of the world. And so if you only have this shard of understanding, you're going to miss out on a lot of what's actually going on because you only have this one tool for analyzing everything. And you see that with certain kinds of like leftism, right? It's wild to me. Like all of my friends, I mean, if it rains, they blame capitalism. You know, it's this one trick pony ideology, which is every ill comes back down to the one issue that you have to understand the world through, which is anti-capitalism or anti-racism or whatever it is that you cling on to as your story for understanding the world. But it's just a chapter in the story of what it is to understand the whole world. There's many more layers and there's a lot more that you don't know. That's why I prefer not an ideology, but more like a system of values and, you know, things like truth, generosity, compassion, equality. I like to look at the world through values instead, because then I can, you know, assess things in a more methodical way instead of having to try to force everything into a single story. I can just look at something and say, does this hold truth up? Does this hold compassion up? Instead of saying, well, everything is supposed to be white people's fault, but in this situation, it's not. Okay, so I have to find a way to blame them. You know, like that's what happens with these kind of ideologies, is that you have to do this reverse engineering, which is you start with the conclusion and then from there you build out the reasons why your conclusion is right, instead of genuinely trying to get to the truth of a situation. And so I think that that's really why we can have watched all these movies about tyranny, about, you know, all the stuff with the pandemic too, like 28 Days Later, all these kind of movies where quarantining and viruses are a theme. It's crazy to me that we all grew up on movies like this. And then when something like this happens and you start to see these dynamics of 2 weeks to slow the spread, 2 months to slow the spread, 2 years to slow the spread, you know, we don't grab on it. And yeah, I know that there's more people that are definitely, you know, seeing through it for sure. And that's very heartening. But you would think that a culture that is rife with these kind of movies that are very suspicious of government and, you know, focused on apocalyptic events would be ready to go, ready to catch these dynamics in real life. And I
I don't
wonder,
think so.
well, I wonder if
I don't,
there's even a condemnation of art there. I worry, you know, like, why is it that we can watch these stories play out in art and they haven't gotten into us enough to help us see them play out in
because
life?
what movie can you even put your, if we assume in a general way, and it's actually not correct, because let's use Canada for a second, because that's in the news right now and I've been following that and paying attention. I didn't know that if you're unvaccinated in Canada, you're not allowed to leave the country. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
I
found that out
maybe had
yesterday.
heard that at one point, but I didn't know that. That's severe. That's worse than it is in the United States.
Yeah, you've lost your right to movement. Like, you become a prisoner of the state. That's
But
very far reaching.
so let me get to why I think that maybe to some degree this is the case. Because we're not in the West practiced in seeing left-wing governments be totalitarian. That's just not the programming. And you see it in this movie. That's not Alan Moore's perspective. His concern was a right-wing fascist pseudo-Christian dictatorship. And hey, if that were what was in power, I would be against that also. I would be totally with it. But
It's
I'm
so
looking around
funny,
myself
though.
and that's simply not the case. And so now in the year 2022, fair enough, that was your concern in 2005. And we could argue about this or that and say, but I don't care. That's not the situation it is right now. Right now you have Justin Trudeau, who is like the most, I mean,
He's like the poster child of like a liberal leader.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like, I mean,
So
you
we're
could
not, we're simply not. Now, here's where you get people from Eastern Europe who lived under communism,
they can see
or
it.
Cuba to an extent, or Venezuela, people that have come from these other systems where they struggled under a left-wing authoritarian totalitarian system. They will tell you their practice, they understand, but that is not the cultural output of the West and Hollywood. It's simply not.